Number 1. Cousins. This story had the most profound effects on my life in many more ways than one. It caused me the most distress I had ever experienced before, and also shook up some of my beliefs, more than I can explain as well. This happened when I was about 13 years old. It is not in the United States, and I am certain that most of your stories are. However, I do not want to mention where it was that this story did take place. Just know that I grew up in a very nice, beautiful, mountainous area that is still very beautiful today. My family was very poor growing up, and I had 5 brothers and sisters. We were okay for always having clothes and food. That was never a problem. We didn't have a whole lot of toys to play with, though. We had a few that our mom would make us, and very once in a great while, we would get something from a store, but that was very rare. We didn't think about it too much, though. Most times you can't miss the things that you do not have. So what did we have? We had the woods, the hills, the mountains, and from as early as we knew it, we would explore the area. Whenever relatives came to visit, us kids would be shooed off into the woods in order to give the parents all the time to themselves. Again, one day that I was 13, something major happened in my life. It was during the spring, and my dad's sister and kids were visiting, so several of us decided to go on a hike that day. My cousin was about my age, and both being 13 years old, we wanted to spend the time more together, talking to each other, than paying attention to the little kids. And as we were the 2 oldest boys of all the kids that were hiking that day, it was our job to make sure that we were watching the younger children. We had gathered around an old creek that we very often went to hang out in. A few of us older kids went swimming, although we couldn't allow some of the really younger kids to do that. Most of them, if they did play in the water at all, did not go very far into the water, only far enough that it would cover up their ankles. On that day, I'm not sure how long we stayed, playing in that creek out in the woods. However, when it was time for us all to go home, we all just headed out in that direction. When we got back, the parents were all inside, getting things ready for dinner. So we went as kids and went to get cleaned up for dinner. It wasn't until after the washing up that finally someone noticed that something was wrong. One of my cousins, an 8-year-old named Kate, was missing. We checked all over the house and then the yard to see if she was hiding or something, but we were unable to find her. And then when we were 100% sure that she wasn't around, my cousin, her older brother, got his butt chewed off by his mom. My cousin admitted that he hadn't checked to see if Kate was with us before we headed back, but he insisted he had told all the children that we were headed back. Normally, that was all he did, and that would have been enough for the children to head on back. After getting chewed out, I accompanied him back out into the woods. We, of course, didn't think that if she had stayed behind at the creek, that she would still be there, but it was a good place to look. But along the way, we both kept calling out her name. We didn't walk in a straight line, looking around as much as we could, trying to figure out where she might have been. And once we got back up to the creek, she was not there, of course. So the 2 of us decided to split up and search in different directions. We tried not to get out of earshot of each other. We weren't having any luck finding Kate, though, but there was no way that either of us were just going to go back to the house without having found her. Don't think we were just worried about getting in trouble either. I know that is the only thing that I have mentioned so far about the situation, but I was concerned about my cousin, and of course, my cousin was completely freaked out about the possibility of his sister not coming back. And yeah, before anyone mentions it, he knew it would be completely his fault as well. So yeah, it was dark outside. We were no closer to finding Kate than we had been when we originally set out. We had brought a couple of flashlights, but they were those really cheap, thin plastic ones that you buy for $1 or so they didn't give us a whole lot of light to see. I had still remained close enough to my cousin to hear him as he was calling for Kate. However, I could tell that we were getting further apart. I had to do my best to make sure that I was not going to get lost either. In the middle of calling for Kate, I heard my cousin yelp. It was like something had cut him off in mid-word. Just the strange sound of the word being cut off like that sent a shock through my system. I called out to him, trying to see if he was all right. However, although we were both still in vocal range, he didn't respond to me. And try to imagine how that was like for me. This whole situation was weird enough to begin with, and this was all taking place in a very, very dark forest. After several attempts to get him to answer me, I got very, very worried and very, very scared. I decided I had to head in the direction that I had last heard his voice. So I began going that way, with my flashlight giving me that ever so small amount of light, so that I could see directly in front of me, but not where I was actually going. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my mind was coming up with all sorts of different scenarios that could explain what happened. Unfortunately, none of those scenarios were good in any way, although one thing that never occurred to me was the possibility of another person being out there. So I kept calling out for my cousin, hoping to get an answer from him. Nothing other than the normal noises of the night in the forest. I was not getting anything. I didn't hear any talking. I didn't hear anything more than just crickets and frogs and things. And I was beginning to get really scared. But nothing as scary as when I kicked something with my feet. The object flung forward where it hit a tree. When I shined my flashlight over it, a new pang of terror took over me. It was my cousin's flashlight. This was the first time that I considered some sort of foul play, and although the most rational idea was that there was another person out there, of course my 13-year-old brain started thinking about monsters and things like that, and I was terrified. I stopped calling out for my cousin, or for Kate. If either of them were out there and in trouble, they would have been able to call out for me if they could. But if someone with bad intentions was out there, me calling their name would just lead them to me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me thought I should keep looking further, and part of me thought I needed to get back to the house and get the parents involved in this. There was no reason at all that my cousin should have dropped his flashlight. I don't know how long I waited, trying to decide what to do, and while I was trying to decide what my next step was, I heard some movement off to the side of me. I looked off in that direction, trying to see if I could see anyone. I turned off my flashlight to prevent any possible nefarious person from being able to see me. I was truly scared, however, that my two cousins were the victims of someone or something in those woods. I thought that it was only going to be a matter of time before I was the next one. I heard some more noises and looked off in the direction of the noise. I was terrified, wondering what I would see, but I didn't see much. But it was obvious that someone was over there, and that someone was coming in my direction. Terrified, I found a large tree and pressed myself up against it, trying to hide myself in any way that I could think of. I was literally frozen in fear when I saw a figure standing before me. "Give me the flashlight," my dad told me. Looking up, I saw him and my uncle. "What's going on and what has been taking you so long?" I explained to them what was going on. Then we went and got the other flashlight. When we had them both, my dad insisted that I go home. I tried to get him to let me stay and continue to look, but he refused. He gave me one of the flashlights and sent me back. The walk home was no less scary than it was before my dad showed up. I was still scared that someone or something had taken my cousins, and whatever it was, could have just been out there for me too. So I was scared and I didn't stop being scared, not even when I made it all the way back to the house. It was quite a while before anything else happened, and when it did, my dad and uncle returned with both of my cousins. Both of them looked terrified, and when I asked my dad and uncle what happened, he refused to tell me and sent all the kids out of the room. It wasn't until much later that I got any information at all about what had happened to my cousins. Both of them had been grabbed by somebody in the woods and taken to a campsite. My elder cousin hadn't seen who it was, so he couldn't tell me much. All he told me was that when our dads came across them, they beat the living shit out of whoever it was. They addressed him by name, so they had to have known who he was. But he said that the entire thing was terrifying, and he had no idea what the man wanted with them. I'm just glad that I got both of my cousins back. Number 2. The Mine. My best friend Tim and I go hiking at least once a year. We always find a new area every time that we go, too. It's not really fun in my opinion to hike over the same areas over and over again. And we don't take hiking trails or anything like that. More often than not, we are hiking on areas that we have no right to be in. That makes it so much more fun. And we've never been caught or arrested or anything, so that much is all the better. We did have a pretty scary experience once, however, when we were hiking in the mountains. We always went hiking because we like nature and things like that. We like getting away, and we liked having some peace and quiet. We never went hiking to look for anything. And what I mean by that is I know people who have gone on treasure hikes. I personally know someone who is obsessed with D.B. Cooper, and often goes on his hikes because he is still convinced, to this day, that he will eventually find him. I have always found that to be nonsense. But that's not it. I know people who have been trying hunting a few other well-known treasures, and even some who make up their minds that there are treasures in areas that no one's ever even heard of. Tim and I just enjoy hiking. And the reason I bring all this up about treasure hunting, or hunting for other stuff as well, is because of what we found once when we were out hiking. We hadn't gone to the area expecting to find anything, but we did. This was a beautiful area in Colorado. I really wish I could describe it to you, but I would never be able to do it justice. So the area was gorgeous. We were going hiking there in the early fall, so we experienced a multitude of colors in the trees. I could just close my eyes and still see how wonderful it all looked. One day, when we were out hiking and a bit separated, I heard Tim yell at me that he had found something. He wanted me to hurry over so that I could take a look. When I got over to where Tim was, I found that he had discovered an old mine. It had some boards and some plant growth over the portal, but it was definitely an old mine. And this wasn't the sort of thing that we came across before, and as I mentioned, we hadn't been out there looking for anything like it. But still, we were really intrigued by it, so the two of us began working our hardest to try and clear off some of the vegetation, so we could work on getting the boards off the mine. It took us a while before we were able to clear the portal in order to go in, but immediately I didn't like the idea of doing it. There was something very creepy and very off-putting about the mine. But Tim was excited, so I decided to go with him. It was of course dark in the mine, and the walk was very steep. Fortunately, it wasn't too wet, so we were having an easy enough time getting down in it. The mine was creepy, but of course going through any sort of mine in the dark would have to be creepy for anyone. And that's when Tim saw something on the ground, and he moved close to it to look at it. It was a bundle of something wrapped up on the ground. I don't like the look of that, I told Tim. It looks like a rolled up dead body or something. Tim agreed with that part, but it didn't stop him from trying to undo the bundle. He kept at it, I guess maybe excited for the idea that it was a body. That's when I heard a noise not too far away from the bundle, lying on the ground. I shined my flashlight on it and froze in terror. "Tim, stop," I instructed him. He didn't. "Stop it, and look where this is shining." Annoyed with me, Tim did stop, and he followed my light beam. And when he saw the rattlesnake that wasn't too far away from the bundle, he lost all interest in the bundle. He slowly stood up, and very slowly backed up to where I was. We broke after that and took off, assuming the snake couldn't get us, of course. We ran all the way out of that mine, and ran past it. When we were in a spot where we could sit down, we both sat down in the grass after not seeing any other snakes there. And yes, we did check. Tim forgot about the snake pretty quickly, though. He actually considered going back to try and see what that bundle was. He wouldn't stop talking about it. He was convinced that he found a murder victim. But there was no way. I would rather have it be a mystery than to take a chance with a rattlesnake. Number 3. Psychic. This is not too long of a story, but it's definitely one that has been a bit difficult to tell. All names will be changed in the story, as will the location of where it took place. I grew up out in the country, as did everyone in my family, and this was much more rural than you see people living nowadays. Hell, I had aunts and uncles who had dirt floors in their homes. Now, the reason I tell you all this is because I want you to understand exactly where I'm coming from in the story. Growing up, one of the things we did most often was play in the woods. It was all second nature to us. So when I was at my sister's place on one very fateful day, it was not out of the ordinary for all of us kids to go out and play in the woods. So they went and did that. I have 4 kids. My sister had 3. And our other sister had 2, and they were all hanging out and playing that day. Much later in the day when the kids returned, one of my younger sister's kids was missing. He had gotten lost out in the woods, and although the other kids had searched up and down for him, they weren't able to locate him. I went out with my sister's husbands in order to find the boy, but as much as we knew those woods, and as much as we combed them thoroughly, we were unable to find him. We kept searching in the dark, then again the next day. By the next afternoon, a search party was organized in order to try and find him. And that really didn't go anywhere either. They didn't leave a stone unturned trying to find him, and we still didn't have any luck. Being gone for nearly 48 hours, we had to face the grim reality that he might not be alive anymore. My sister then hired a local psychic. The psychic told us that the boy was still alive, and she explained in detail where we would find him. She told us that time was absolutely of the essence, and we needed the search party to go and search where she felt he was. The entire search party searched in that area, but the search was in vain. My sister was the sort of person who believed in psychics and such, so she insisted that we look in that area that the psychic had told her to. But despite how much we looked in that area, we were unable to find him. Consulting her psychic again, the psychic informed my sister that her son had died, and there was no use in continuing the search. My sister didn't question this, although some searching was still done. She didn't realize that the psychic's first prediction of where her son would be found was completely wrong, so she shouldn't believe anything else. Searches continued, but they didn't go for very long. My sister accepted the fact that her son was dead, and that's all there was to it. About a week later, I got a call from my sister on the phone. They had found her son, and he was alive and well. He had thought that it would be a funny prank if he ran off and hid, and he broke into an old house and was living in his basement for a week. He had liked the idea of having everyone out looking for him, and he honestly thought it was funny. Of course, no one else did. But the worst part, though, was what my sister had gone through during this. Because that psychic had told her her son was dead, she had pretty much given up any hope of ever seeing him again. What is scary to me is that anyone could allow themselves to lose hope based off some money-grubbing whims of a charlatan.